Hey everybody, Stephen Bogren here, and today I'm talking about the science of losing body fat.
My name is Steven, and this is our video about health and fitness things. And I work for Poverty, and I am just a guy with a fitness thing for you.
Hey everybody, I hope you're all having a wonderful flippin' day today. Oof, it is Thursday? It's Thursday, at least when I'm recording this. And I think that this is another important topic because a lot of times we get sold on just a whole slew of ideas of how we're burning body fat and losing pounds and what body fat is and what it isn't. And we just get into this and how do I actually make progress? How do I actually get rid of the body fat? This is a very valid question because remember, oftentimes, even though we might be losing weight, it doesn't necessarily mean we're losing body fat. And sometimes we can be maintaining weight and still losing body fat. So I think the best place to start with this is, what is the science of losing body fat? Well, the best way for us to, I think, really assess that is to maybe not just use the scale. We can use the scale still, absolutely. But we might want to use that in conjunction with a couple of other pieces of objective information collecting. Things like our waist measurement, our hip measurement, our bust measurement in particular for ladies, or a chest measurement, biceps. Looking at some of those other measurement tools to see if we're seeing positive progress in those. Are those measurements increasing and or decreasing? And then along with that, looking at pictures. Do I have better lines? Are my deltoids, is that line sharper? Can I see more of my triceps? Are my obliques looking more defined? Oh, look, there's some hip detail there, or some quad split in my leg. And then pairing those things together. These are obviously the cheapest things that we can do. You can look at body composition measurement tools, although I would say that they're not my favorite because it does tend to get us caught up on maybe what is an arbitrary number for a lot of people. And a lot of those measurement tools can have inherent error ratios. So if we're going to do those, we just want to try and utilize the things that are probably going to be more dependable. So maybe things like DEXA scanning. But the problem here with that is that that can become very pricey. So we just want to keep that in mind. The bod pod stuff, cool. The in-body scanners, cool. Remember, in-body is bioelectrical impedance. So even though, they can be good, everything also requires that we have specific testing criteria met. And that is consistent over time, just like anything else. So we do want to be aware of that. But understanding that our measurements can improve, our weight might not change. So taking all these things together and looking at them as a whole. Because, particularly if you haven't been weight training before, you can absolutely be trading out maybe body fat weight for some muscle weight and seeing some really awesome improvements in terms of how your body composition looks, how you look in the mirror, and of course, how you're responding and feeling about how you look. So those things are all super important to just be aware of. But let's talk a little bit about what does losing body fat mean? Because losing body fat does not mean burning fat per se. Ooh, scary, dangerous. And the reason that I say that is because a lot of times we think that if we do this specific type of cardio that it's burning more fat or it burns more fat. It may burn more fat, but it may not necessarily burn more body fat. We think of doing a specific dietary approach because it burns more fat. It may burn more fat, but it may not burn more body fat. Because when we talk about burning more fat, that simply means that we're using that fat as an energy source. It doesn't necessarily delineate where that fat is coming from. Particularly on things like ketogenic diets, of course we're going to burn more fat as a fuel substrate or an energy source because our calories are all coming from fat. It's what's readily available. Also, when we do those things, you become adapted to the dietary intake, right? If we go into ketosis, we now become much better at utilizing fat as an energy source. Our body's making that transition, it's creating more enzymes. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're freeing up more body fat and using that. Because when we talk about burning body fat, what we have to see to do that is something that we call lipolysis, which is where we actually are taking that fat molecule, separating off those free fatty acids now into the bloodstream, and then using those as energy. Because if we don't use them, what happens is we will repackage those same free fatty acids, or we can, and then restore it. So we are looking for, when we're talking about loss of body fat, lipolysis. What that is going to require for us is a calorie deficit. There are a lot of different ways for us to accomplish that, but again, we have to be in a calorie deficit, burning more calories than we're using. Otherwise, a lot of times what will happen is we can still have lipolysis happen, but we're either storing more new body fat, whether it be the ones we freed up or ones we got from dietary intake, or we're taking those same body fats and just restoring them. We can also, remember, like, transfer over those things via glucose as well, and then convert that into fats, and again, store body fat via extra calories. This is why it's really important to understand the difference between burning fat and burning body fat. Because remember, at the end of the day, it comes down to being in a caloric deficit, burning more calories than you're utilizing. And it's not a bad idea to maybe prioritize on some things that burn more fat just out of pure necessity. And this is why I like steady state cardio so much, is yes, it burns more fat. And what that means is that as we get up to a certain intensity of our cardiovascular activity, our calories go up, but the amount of percentages for fats or carbohydrates, those change. So when we get to a certain intensity, because the intensity is too high, we need high or faster energy sources. And since fat's a slow energy source, the percentage of fat in those calories burned now starts coming down. Carbohydrates and phosphates start taking a little bit more out of that. That's not my bigger concern. My bigger concern is that when we stay within that range where we're like maximizing fat usage, we're staying at an intensity to where it's long-term very able to do. And so what that means is we can do it for hours on end if we wanted to, and we don't have to recover from it, which I think is a huge benefit in terms of just stress response, your body being able to like physiologically adapt to that, and making sure that we're not overdoing it and just stacking more stress, and forcing you to kill yourself. So I do think there is benefit there. And I do think there is benefit to having that cardiovascular activity, because if we have none, then we're not adapted to it at all. If we have some, then yes, we're still creating this adaptation response for the body to create more enzymes that help with utilizing body fat as energy. So we become better at it. Once we're adapted to that, perfect, that's what we want. So we don't necessarily want to have none, because we still want to be good at burning body fat, utilizing it, creating that opportunity for lipolysis where we're freeing that up and then able to use it. Very important. But we also don't want to say just because we're burning fat means that we're losing body fat per se. I know it's like a silly delineation to make, but it is an important one that we understand, because for most of us, when we say we want to burn more fat, what we truly mean is we want to burn more body fat. And we can do that in a whole slew of ways. So we don't necessarily have to do a specific type of cardio. We don't necessarily have to do a specific type of diet. We can lose body fat, high carb, low carb, protein, moderate, high protein, whatever it might be. You know, we can do it moderate fat, we can do it high fat. There's a lot of different ways to do it, because at the end of the day, in terms of that, it's about creating a calorie deficit. It's about burning more than we intake. And so we don't want to get sold on maybe something that might be not realistic for us in the long term when it comes to approach for diet. What we want to look at instead is figuring out a sustainable approach for us as an individual and what works for us. So maybe for you, keto's a great option. Maybe for you, you're like, yes, I love fats, proteins, I don't really need a lot of carbs. This fits my lifestyle, my taste, and I could do this forever. Perfect, awesome. Then your high fat burning diet is successful for you. Beautiful, that's what we want. For the majority of people, that may not be the same thing. And that's why we probably don't want to focus too much on the idea of burning fat as opposed to burning body fat. Making this delineation helps us to kind of get away from maybe some of the marketing and some of the other things that will make us think that we can only do one thing that's going to be either very difficult for us or not manageable and maintainable for us in the long term. So remember, burning fat and burning body fat are not the same thing, and we can do one without having to do the crazy stuff that we're being told that we may have to do for the other. So keep that in mind when you're looking at your diets. I hope this helps, and we'll talk soon.